My own flesh and blood left me on that hospital bed to die. The nurses called them twice. My doctor called them himself. And my son told him, without flinching, without a pause, that's not our problem. I lay there for 4 days, somewhere between this world and the next. Then they came. Not because they were sorry, not because they loved me. They came because they'd heard I might not make it, and they wanted to make sure they got there before I did. But when they walked into that room, the bed was empty. There was only an envelope on the pillow. When my daughter read what was inside, she grabbed the wall to keep from falling. Before we go any further, tell me where you're listening from. Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. The pain woke me before I knew where I was. It started in my shoulder, then spread across my chest like someone had pressed a hot iron flat against my ribs and left it there. I tried to open my eyes and the light hit me like a punishment. Fluorescent, cold, relentless. The smell came next, that bleached, clinical smell that lives in hospitals, the kind that coats the back of your throat and reminds you that something has gone wrong. I was in a bed. The rails were up on both sides. A monitor beeped somewhere to my left, steady and indifferent, like it didn't care whether I pulled through or not. My right arm felt heavy. I looked down. IB Lime taped at the wrist with that beige medical tape that pulls the hair off your skin when they remove it. A thin hospital bracelet with my name printed in small black letters. Harlan Brooks. Still me. Still here. I tried to piece it together. I remembered the parking lot of the grocery store on Route 9, the one I'd been going to for 15 years. I remembered the car catching on a crack in the asphalt. Remembered reaching down to free it, and then a crushing in my chest so sudden and complete that I thought for a moment I'd been shot. I went down on one knee, then both knees. Then the ground came up fast. Someone must have called 911. That was the last thing I had. A nurse came in before I could think much further. Young woman, early 30s maybe, dark hair pulled back, moving with that efficient calm that good nurses have. She checked the monitor, looked at me, and let out a breath that sounded almost like relief. "Mr. Brooks," she said, "you're awake. Good. You really gave us a scare." What happened to me? My voice came out rough, like gravel in a tin can. "Heart attack," she said simply, without softening it. "Significant one. You were unconscious when the paramedics brought you in. We stabilized you, but it was a close call." She paused, adjusting the drip on my IV. "You've been out for about 18 hours. 18 hours. I turned that over in my mind. 18 hours in which my children should have known. Should have been here. "My family," I said. "Did someone call them?" She set down her clipboard. Something crossed her face. Not pity, exactly, more like careful neutrality. The kind people put on when they're deciding how much truth to hand you. "Dr. Kelmer will be in shortly," she said. "He'll go over everything with you." She left before I could ask anything else. The room had a window. Outside, the sky was the pale gray of early morning, the kind of sky that can't decide between clearing up and pouring down. A few birds moved across it. I watched them and tried not to think about what her careful neutrality meant. Dr. Kellner was a tall man, 60s, with reading glasses pushed up on his forehead and the measured way of speaking that comes from years of delivering difficult news. He pulled a chair to my bedside and sat down, which I noticed. Doctors who sit are either about to take their time or embrace you for something. "You had a myocardial infarction, Mr. Brooks," he said. "A serious one. We got to you fast enough to prevent permanent damage, but it was genuinely close. Another few minutes in that parking lot and we'd be having a very different conversation." He let that land. "The good news is you're stable. We'll keep you for observation, run some additional tests, adjust your medications, but you're going to be all right." "My family," I said again, "were they contacted?" He looked at his hands for a moment, then he looked back at me. "We called your son," he said. "The number listed on your emergency contact form. A man named Douglas." I nodded. "My son, 41 years old, lives about 20 minutes away, over in Clarksville." "I spoke to him myself," Dr. Kellner said. "I told him you'd had a cardiac event and that you were critical. I told him you might not make it through the night." "And?" He was quiet for a second. "He said, and I want to be precise here because I wrote it down. He said, he's made his choices, that's on him." The room went silent. Not the normal hospital silence with its underlying hum of machines and distant footsteps, a different kind of silence. The kind that lives inside a person when something that should be impossible turns out to be true. He made his choices. That's on him. Douglas, my son. The boy I drove to Little League practice every Saturday for 6 years, rain or shine, even the February when it snowed 6 inches and I still showed up because I told him I would. The boy I co-signed on his first apartment because his credit was thin and who I bailed out of a failed car detailing business at 32 without a word of reproach, because I believed in him and didn't want him to lose faith in himself. That's on him. My daughter, I said. My voice was flat. Renata, was she reached? We called the second number on your form after your son didn't come, she answered. And? She said she was out of town and couldn't get back. Did she ask about me? He paused just a half-second too long. She asked if there was a directive on file. I turned my head toward the window. A directive. My daughter, hearing that her father might be dying, asked whether there was a living will, whether they should keep me going. The sky outside had gone darker, not lighter. Rain was coming after all. Could you leave me alone for a little while? I said. He stood, touched my arm briefly, and left without another word. Alone, I let myself feel it. Not the chest pain. That was dulled by whatever they had running through my IV. I mean the other thing. The deeper thing. The one that doesn't have a proper name, but that every parent who's ever been discarded by a child knows exactly what I mean. You spend decades loving someone more than you love yourself. You make choices every single day that cost you something, sleep, money, pride, time, and you make those choices gladly, or mostly gladly, because they are yours and you are theirs, and that is supposed to mean something. And then you find out it meant something different to them than it meant to you. On the bedside table, next to a plastic cup of water with a bent straw, was my watch. A Belova, navy dial, silver case. My wife Pauline gave it to me on our 25th anniversary. She's been gone 11 years now. The watch still keeps perfect time. I reached for it and held it, feeling the weight of it in my palm. Pauline would have been here. Pauline would have slept in that chair by the window without being asked. But Pauline was gone, and the children I had raised, the children we had raised together, her and I, in that house on Millbrook Drive with the broken screen door and the garden she loved, had decided that a father lying in critical condition in a hospital bed was someone else's responsibility. I set the watch down and stared at the ceiling. A thought came, not dramatic, just quiet, like a curtain shifting in a breeze. I could let go. I was 68 years old. I was tired in ways that sleep couldn't fix, and the two people I'd spent my life building toward had just told me, in plain language, that I was alone. What exactly was I fighting for? I lay there with that thought for a long minute. Then something else came, a memory, sharp and clear. I am 44 years old, and my business, a small commercial plumbing company I built over 12 years, is 3 months from closing. I have payroll I can't make, a line of credit I've maxed, and a wife sitting across the kitchen table who reaches over and puts her hand on mine and says, "You always find a way." I didn't feel like I could find a way. I felt like I was already sunk, but I went back in the next morning and I found a way. I restructured, took a smaller contract to hold the cash flow, let 2 people go while I'd had to rehire a year later at better wages. The company didn't just survive, it grew. I sold it for enough at 60 to retire comfortable and help both my kids with down payments on their houses. That man didn't quit. I picked up the phone. My attorney's name is Walt Gideon. I've known Walt for 22 years. He's not flashy, doesn't advertise on bus benches, works out of a quiet office in downtown Morganfield, and he is the best man I know at protecting what matters. I called him, and he answered on the 3rd ring, which surprised me given the hour. Harlan. His voice was careful. I heard Sheila at the hospital is a friend of my wife's. How are you? I've been better, I said. I need to see you. Name it. Soon as I'm discharged, there are things I need to change. A pause. Walt has known me long enough to hear what isn't being said. I'll start pulling your documents, he said. There's something else. I want to know if my kids have been making any moves, Douglas or Renata. I want to know if anyone's been asking questions about my estate. Another pause, longer this time. I'll make some calls. Thank you, Walt. I set the phone on the blanket and closed my eyes. My chest ached, but underneath the ache, something was shifting. A slow, cold clarity, the kind that comes when you stop hoping for something and start deciding instead. Walt called back the next morning. I was sitting up eating the hospital's version of scrambled eggs, which tasted like something between foam and cardboard, and I answered before the second ring. Talk to me, I said. Douglas has been in contact with a probate attorney, Walt said, no preamble. Initial consultation 2 weeks ago. Before your heart attack, Harlan, he was already asking questions. I set down my fork. 2 weeks ago. Yes. Now, a consultation isn't actionable. He hasn't filed anything, but he was asking specifically about real property and what rights adult children have if a parent becomes incapacitated or passes without updating documents. I sat with that for a moment. My house, the house on Millbrook Drive where those kids grew up, where Pauline planted those azaleas along the back fence that still bloom every April, where I shoveled the driveway and fixed the furnace and repainted the siding myself 3 separate times over 30 years. Douglas had gone to a lawyer asking about his rights to it, before I'd even had a heart attack, like he was already running the numbers on my life, deciding when it would finally be convenient for me to be gone. And Renata. Renata's been talking to Douglas. I don't have specifics on her yet, but the two of them have been in regular contact since about a month ago. My contact says they were discussing, quote, getting ahead of things. Getting ahead of things. I thought about my daughter, her careful way of dressing, her methodical mind, her talent for making things sound reasonable that weren't. She had always been the strategist between the two of them. Douglas had the temper. Renata had the plan. All right, I said, here's what I want to do. I laid it out for Walt. He listened without interrupting, which is what I've always appreciated about him. When I finished, he said, "You sure?" "I'm sure." "Okay," he said. "I'll have everything ready by the time you're out." I hung up and sat for a while in the quiet of the hospital room. Rain was hitting the window again. On the bedside table, Pauline's watch caught a sliver of gray light. They think they're getting ahead of things. They're about to find out I've already gotten ahead of them. The call came on my 3rd day there. Douglas. I let it ring twice, then answered. Dad. His voice had that particular tightness he gets when he's trying to sound calm over something he isn't calm about. How are you doing? I heard you had some kind of episode. Some kind of episode. Heart attack, I said. I was in critical condition for about 18 hours. Right. Listen, the timing was just terrible. I had a situation here with the kids and Janet wasn't. Dr. Kellner called you himself, I said. He told you I might not make it through the night. You told him that's my problem. Silence. That's not... I didn't say it like that. He wrote it down, Douglas. More silence. I heard him breathe. Dad, look, we need to talk about some practical things. The house and your arrangements. You're not getting any younger, and if something had actually happened, we would have been totally in the dark about everything, and that's not fair to us. Not fair to them. I almost laughed. The man who didn't come to the hospital because it wasn't convenient was now telling me that my dying without prior notice would not be fair to him. We'll talk, I said, when I'm out. When are they releasing you? Soon, I said, and hung up. Renata called an hour later. Where Douglas is blunt, Renata is smooth. She started with 3 sentences about how worried she'd been, how the news had really shaken her, how she'd booked a flight the moment she could get away. All of it delivered in the warm, measured tone she uses for things she wants you to receive in a particular way. Daddy, she said. She only calls me Daddy when she wants something. I think we really need to sit down as a family. There's a lot to sort through, and I just want to make sure we do it in a way that's thoughtful and that protects everyone. Protects everyone, I repeated. You know what I mean. I'm not sure I do, Renata. Last I checked, I'm the one who was in the ICU. What exactly are you worried about protecting? She shifted. I heard it. I just mean your assets, your property, making sure things are handled properly so there's no confusion later. No confusion. She meant no confusion for her and her brother about what they were going to receive when I died. She wasn't worried about me. She was worried about her share. I appreciate the concern, I said. I'll be in touch. I ended the call and sat there for a long time. There is a particular grief that belongs only to parents who have seen their children clearly for the first time and not liked what they saw. It isn't anger, though anger is in it. It isn't disappointment, though that's in it too. It is more like loss, quiet and permanent. The loss of a version of your children you'd spent a long time believing in. The children who would show up. The children who would put you first at least once, the way you had always put them first. That version had been gone for a while, I understood now. I'd just been refusing to see it. I picked up the phone one more time, not to call him, to call Walt. Move forward, I said when he answered. All of it. I'll have everything notarized by end of week, he said. The morning I was discharged, I woke up before the nurses came and lay still in the early light, listening. The hospital had a particular quiet at that hour. The overnight staff still moving, the day shift not yet arrived, the building holding its breath between shifts. I didn't feel at peace exactly, but I felt settled, which is different. On the table beside me, Pauline's watch, my wallet, my phone, my keys, the things you carry through your life. I took a sheet of paper from the drawer. Hospitals always have a notepad, usually with some generic logo on it, and I wrote, not a long letter. I've never been a man who says things with a lot of words. I kept it simple and direct, the way I would have said it to their faces if I'd thought they would hear me. I told them what they would find when they met with Walt. I told them that the house on Millbrook Drive, which they'd been discussing how to divide before I'd even finished having my heart attack, was being placed into a charitable trust. I told them that the accounts they were planning to argue over had been restructured. I told them that I had been alive and aware long enough to understand exactly what they'd been doing, and that I had made my decisions accordingly. I told them that I didn't hate them. That was the truest part of the letter, and probably the part they wouldn't believe. But I didn't. I was their father, and I would be their father until I stopped breathing, and nothing they had done changed the fact that I had loved them completely for 41 years. What it changed was what I was going to do about it. I sealed the envelope and left it on the pillow. Walt was in the lobby when I came down, car keys in hand, looking like a man who has just organized something he found satisfying. All signed, witnessed, and filed, he said. You're solid. We drove back toward Morganfield. I watched the town through the passenger window, the gas stations and the fast food places, and the old hardware store that somehow still survives, and the library where I used to take the kids on Saturday afternoons when they were small enough to still want to go. All of it familiar, all of it still mine. My phone went off about 2 hours later, Douglas first, then Renata. I let them both go to voicemail. I was sitting on the back porch when Douglas called a fourth time, and I finally answered. I heard the noise of the hospital parking lot in the background. They had gone, finally, not to see me, but to find out what I'd left behind. You gave it all away. His voice was incredulous, almost childlike, the way children sound when they cannot comprehend that the world does not owe them what they assumed. To a charity, all of it. A few charities, I said. And the house goes into a trust that funds college scholarships for kids in the county. First-generation students. Kids who don't have anyone helping them get there. You can't do this. It was done 3 days ago, son. Walt will explain the details. This is insane. You're punishing us. I looked out at Pauline's garden. The azaleas along the back fence were starting to bud. Another few weeks and they'd be fully open. The same deep pink they always were. The same as the first spring after she was gone, when I stood out here alone and couldn't believe how they still bloomed without her there to tend them. I'm not punishing you, I said. I needed a heart attack and 4 days alone in a hospital to understand something I should have understood a long time ago. The money was never going to make you love me. I kept thinking if I helped enough, gave enough, one day I stopped, breathed. It doesn't matter now, this is where we are. Dad, you have your lives, both of you. You have jobs and houses and children of your own, and I paid for more of that than I should have, probably. You'll be fine. I paused. I hope you'll be fine. He didn't say anything. Take care of yourself, Douglas, I said, and hung up. Renata didn't call back. She sent a text, 3 lines, carefully worded, saying she thought I'd acted out of emotion and that she hoped I'd reconsider. I read it once and set the phone face down on the porch railing. The sky had cleared by late afternoon. That sharp, clean light that comes after a few days of rain when everything looks newer than it actually is. I sat out there a long time. A neighbor from 2 doors down, a man named Gerald I've waved at for 20 years without knowing much about him, saw me over the fence and called out, "Good to see you up and around, Harlan. Heard you had a rough week." "Getting better," I told him, "day at a time." He nodded, the way men of a certain age nod at each other when they know that's the only honest answer, and went back inside. Walt came by that evening with a bottle of decent bourbon and 2 glasses, which I thought was exactly the right response to the week I'd had. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I used to help Douglas with his homework, where Renata used to spread out her craft projects that would take over every inch of available space, and Walt poured 2 fingers each and didn't say much, which is one of the things I value most about him. "How do you feel?" he asked finally. I thought about it honestly. My chest still ached. My kids were furious with me and would probably stay that way for a long time, maybe forever. The house felt large and quiet in a way it hadn't before. I was 68 years old and I had just done something irreversible. "Lighter," I said. "I feel lighter." Walt nodded, turning his glass slowly on the table. "You know those scholarship kids are going to have no idea where the money came from." "That's fine." Pauline would have liked that part. I looked at the window over the sink, at the dark outside and the reflection of the kitchen light in the glass. "Yeah," I said, "she would have." We finished the bourbon. Walt left around 9. I washed the glasses, put them back in the cabinet, and turned off the kitchen light. Walked through the house in the dark the way I used to when the kids were small, and I'd do a last check before bed, making sure the doors were locked and the stove was off and everyone was safe. Old habits. In the bedroom, I set Pauline's watch on the nightstand where I always put it. Sat on the edge of the bed for a minute, hands on my knees. I thought about the scholarship. A kid somewhere in this county, first in their family to go to college, getting a letter that tells them they're funded. They'll never know my name. They'll never know what it cost to get that money there, what was lost and what was chosen and what was survived. They'll just know that someone somewhere decided they were worth believing in. That felt like the right thing to leave behind. I lay back and let the quiet settle around me, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, I slept without waiting for anything. I keep coming back to one moment, not the heart attack, not the phone calls, not even the look I imagine on my son's face when Walt read him the terms. I keep coming back to that hospital room at 3 in the morning, holding Pauline's watch in the dark, asking myself whether there was any reason left to fight. That's the moment everything turned on, not the legal documents, not the charity trust, that quiet decision made alone to get back up. I spent a long time believing that love was enough to hold a family together, that if I gave generously and showed up consistently and kept the door open, my children would eventually become the people I raised them to believe they could be. What I didn't understand, what took me 68 years and a cardiac event to learn, is that character isn't inherited. It's built. And it's built through difficulty, through being told no, through learning that the world doesn't reorganize itself around your comfort. Douglas and Renata never learned that. Not because they were born bad, because I never let them be uncomfortable long enough to grow. That's on me as much as it's on them. I see that now. But here's what I also see. The moment I stopped making their comfort my responsibility, I got my own life back. Not some diminished version of it, the real thing. Purpose. Clarity. A reason to be out of bed in the morning that had nothing to do with waiting for them to need me. There's a kind of wisdom that only comes from being tested all the way down to nothing and choosing, deliberately, to rebuild anyway. Not out of stubbornness, not out of spite, out of something steadier than either of those. The understanding that your life belongs to you, that what you do with it is the only legacy that actually matters, and that it is never too late to redirect it towards something real. The scholarship fund will outlast me. Some kid in this county, first in their family to go to college, will get a letter that changes the direction of their life. They'll work hard for it. The fund requires maintained grades, community involvement, demonstrated effort. I wanted it that way deliberately. I didn't want to hand anyone something they hadn't earned. I've seen what that does. I won't pretend the grief isn't there. It is. It sits in the kitchen sometimes, in the chair where Douglas used to do homework, in the corner of the backyard where Renata used to read in the summers. Grief for the family I thought I had. Grief for the years I spent negotiating with people who were never going to meet me halfway. But grief and regret are different things. I don't regret what I did. I regret waiting so long to do it. What I know now, sitting on this porch with the azaleas coming in and the evenings getting longer, is that the life worth living is the one you build on honest ground. Not on what people owe you, not on what you hope they'll become, but on what you actually choose to do with the time and resources you have. I chose to invest in strangers who would work for what they received. That felt more like love than anything I'd done in years.